She is.
Oh, there. Hi, you guys.
Hi.
Okay.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Can you turn down?
Let me.
Ryan?
I'm in the preferences right now, and I can't see you yet, but I will be able to just a second. Turn them down. And okay, Zoom, general. Do you want? Are you record? Do you want me to record a backup recording, or you're good?
We're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
still
gonna
a little
cloud. We can send it to you if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Colin.
I'm Melissa.
Melissa.
Nice to meet you.
And you're Leslie. What's your name?
I'm Miguel. Nice to meet you.
Miguel. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Can you turn
Nice picture
us
of you.
down? I mean,
Colin, yeah.
What's that? Oh, you can't see me?
Not
No,
yet.
Just your picture. It's a good picture though.
Oh, okay. Here it is right here. There we are.
there we are.
It is.
Hi.
Hi.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm so excited to have you guys because I've been looking at some of your stuff on YouTube and I'm just amazed at how much you guys know and how authentic it feels coming from you. And I was just impressed. I'm like, I have to have him come on this podcast. Like, I do want to talk about your book later and about shadow work, but first, will you let our audience know a little bit about you guys and what you guys do?
Sure. Do you want to go first?
Yes, we are musicians. I'm mainly a heavy metal musician. Extreme metal musician, yeah. And I'm an audio engineer by trade, and Melissa's a musician too, lifelong musician, all kinds of styles. And so, I mean, we really think about ourselves as artists primarily, but then we're just people who are working on ourselves psychologically, studying ourselves, and then trying to come up with. We're basically, I mean, you might say that we're kind of in the Jungian tradition, and sort of loosely, and we're psycho-spiritual explorers, and then we're documenting what it is that we're learning about ourselves and learning about the human psyche through books and through videos and lectures and whatever that is. So that's kind of maybe...
Yeah, and I would just add that we started to do this work together around 10 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer than 10 years. And we had connected as friends, and he did work for my band. But then we always had this deeper friendship of being able to talk about much deeper subjects and conversations going on for long, long periods of time. And it was some sort of a psycho-spiritual timing that brought us together to start going on these walks together. And also it was a certain time in my life where I said, why are these same patterns keep repeating themselves and cycle through my life?
Right.
I knew I had come from trauma and had all this trauma in my life in many ways, physically and emotionally and all that. But I still had not gotten to the root of why it would keep being this cycles. And so when we started walking and talking, we were able to start through the development of our relationship. It was like something clicked out of our will. It was not
outside of our will.
Outside of our will, right.
Yes.
Which kind of took us over in some sense.
Yeah.
And that's how the book Shadow Tech was written. It was like kind of downloaded.
Yeah, it kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had suffered my own kind of dark night of the soul about maybe 10, 12 years before that, and I had started, researching psychology, Jungian psychology, kind of going in the direction of inner work. And so I already had some tools. And then when Melissa and I got together and we started basically, you know, discovering our past and our patterns and all of that, just the sort of, we both sort of have a natural analytical and introspective capacity. And so we just kind of teamed up and psychoanalyzed ourselves. And then, yeah, it formed there was an energetic psychic connection there, and we became, you could say inflated, but very prolific for a number of years. We were very prolific and a lot of material.
Cute kitty.
We have a nice kitty with us.
I'm a total kitty.
What's your kitty's name?
This is Orangey, my 4-year-old
Orange.
neighbor.
Okay.
Orangey, and there's Midnight.
Oh, there's Midnight.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
we'll get to see Midnight
beautiful.
later.
I love kitties. Okay.
So yeah, so we did a lot of walking and talking and filling up notebooks with ideas
And big whiteboards.
and filling up, and it seemed and it became obvious to us that there was a certain I guess understanding or worldview that we were downloading, that we were working out. Yeah, basically I see the way we worked out the material that's in Shadow Tech, and a lot of our original material was in the same way that artists create art, in that they go into the process with some kind of knowledge of this is what I want to create and this is what we're starting with, but then just through the creative process itself and running up against obstacles and going around those obstacles and inviting information from the unconscious, intuitive information to come up, and just sort of we just approached this this modeling that we're developing from the point of view of artists, because that's kind of how we approach everything anyway.
Yeah.
And it really came out as an artistic, it's very difficult to actually try to, and this is why we use the word alchemy, actually. The reason why we do, because it's sort of an artistic science that is very inwardly directed. It's a scientific, in that it deals with that it needs to be verified and checked with the outside world and checked with other people and make sure that what we're coming up with has some real world validity. But then it also is very intuitively guided and manifests through the creative process.
Yeah, and I would just add that for myself, years ago, I decided when I had cancer that it was up to me. I took total responsibility for the cancer, and that it was up to me to understand my cells and my structure and to go on the healing path in a natural kind of way versus the medical system. So from that time on, I was using my own body as the alchemical vessel, right? And so when we started doing the shadow work and getting all this information and all these synchronicities, it was a continuation of that, using our body, mind, our psyches as the alchemical vessel for our own individuation and healing.
And then the more I got into what the Jungians were saying and doing, the more I realized that this is really, it's in the same tradition. It is a kind of hermetic science. It is an inner alchemy, a spiritual alchemy, or an esoteric alchemy, and it's very related to Jungian thinking and Jungian practice. So that's kind of maybe would help people understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, oh man, this is great. Now that we have newer generations coming in also, a lot of times I get asked, what is shadow work and what's the importance of it? and you guys wrote in your book, and I thought this was amazing. It's such a great answer, is that we may be limiting our own evolution by holding on to obsolete viewpoints of destruction and certainty by denying its nature. Can you explain a little bit of what you mean by that?
That we may be, that we're, what was the quote again?
That you're limiting your own evolution by holding on to obsolete viewpoints of destruction and certainty by denying its nature.
Right. So when you realize that nature itself is filled with chaos and destruction, but also a symbiotic relationship, that the psyche works in the same way, and our lives are always going to have both sides: chaos, challenges, death, decay,
life and death, creation and destruction. To create one thing, you must destroy something else. And if you destroy something else, you don't necessarily create something, but you create the environment where something new can be created. So you can't. And what we do naturally, and this has to do in some ways with the way the whole psyche is structured, is that we tend to we push the destructive side of nature into the shadow, so to speak, out of consciousness. And then all of those things which are chaotic from our point of view, chaotic just means really not understandable to our conscious mind. The more we repress that which is chaotic or not understandable, and deny it, and because we deem it to be sinful or bad or immoral or scary or whatever, but then all we're really doing is we're just temporarily avoiding a crisis situation, a destructive process, which will eventually come and take over the situation and deal with the fact that it will deal with us.
Everything that we find uncomfortable, whether we project it out there or we feel it inside, a lot of times all we do is we push it into a closet.
Right.
That is where all the shadow, that is where all these areas that we don't want to...
We use cognitive dissonance. Unconsciously, we're not aware that we're doing this, but we hold these things that are destructive to the way basically, in order to explain this better, is that you have to kind of have some kind of topology of the psyche. And if you just have a very simple topology of the psyche, it's kind of like the conscious awareness, or what the Jungians refer to as ego consciousness, or the ego, is kind of like everything that's above water or is on land, where the sun is shining. Everything can be seen. And then everything that is below the water, down into the ocean, that's everything that's unconscious. And so that which cannot be seen, which is in the unconscious, is not necessarily shadow material. There's all kinds of bodily processes and psychic processes that are going on in the unconscious that you don't need to know about and don't necessarily need to come up into consciousness. But the shadow are those aspects of our nature, both personally and collectively, that if we were to bring them into the light and start to embrace them, they wouldn't find a natural place in our reality. Okay. They would be chaotic to our reality. They would be detrimental to the way we see ourselves and to the way the world is organized. if you brought into consciousness, and this is an ongoing problem with humanity, is this that we have this lower primal animal nature, and it has all kinds of drives, all kinds of animal drives for dominance or sexuality, and then all kinds of leftover residuals of trauma and rejection and all this kind of stuff. And we don't have a clear place for those things in our minds or in the society at large.
Though
and so
now
that creates
yeah.
an underground culture that
Yeah.
creates all kinds of acting out
and an inversion, which we're seeing now in our culture. That's like shadow.
That's where you've had so much repression for so long,
right.
that it flips out, and it all kind of comes to the surface. It, like a volcano, it just blows out, and you have this in the individual, where you can have these blowouts, and then you have it collectively, where societies have these blowouts, where they have repressed so much of their lower nature that they blow out. So what we do naturally, and it's sort of a byproduct of the way that the psyche is structured, in that if the ego is like the flashlight, it's like everything that's in the light. I mean, there has to be, in order to accomplish anything in the world, in order to take care of your child and figure out what school she's going to go to, or change her diaper, or whatever it is, everything else has to be shut out. This is what I'm doing right here. And when you focus on what you're doing, you shut out everything out.
Which is a natural...
Which is just part... Yeah,
it's actually has kept us being able to survive.
Every creature is shutting out most of the world. We're all shutting out most of the world so we can focus on what we're doing. And then collectively, we determine in a society what it is that we do. And then we shut out everything else. And then you go around the world and you look at other societies and go, wow, you guys are doing things totally different. The way you're seeing the world, you have a different focus than us. Well, the things that you shut out of your consciousness that really should be considered, should be looked at, should be integrated, as we say, are things that we call, it's a category called the shadow. There isn't an actual place in the unconscious that it's a specific little place of this is where shadow material is kept. Shadow material is just anything that would like to bubble up to consciousness. It would like to be metabolized into consciousness, but that if it were to do so, if you were to find out certain things about your nature, it might really challenge your marriage. It might really challenge your career path. It might really challenge your worldview and the way you think about your role in the world and what you're here to do. And so you shove that stuff down, and then it just starts to act as a caustic kind of toxin to eat away at you in one way or another, until you will come to terms with it.
Yeah, and on top of all the different things that you mentioned, then there's this trauma and PTSD and epigenetic trauma that's passed on to us, which also we are pushing into the shadow too.
Yeah, so if I was traumatized, if I was abandoned by my parents or whatever the situation was, and I have this leftover rage or this grief, for example, that's there, but that every time I get in touch with it, it overwhelms me. Well, then I just learn to keep it down and to distract myself, or to drink alcohol or whatever it is to try to nurse myself. And all it does is just builds up. It starts to hurt. It starts to turn into chronic disease and starts to mess with your body. And it it finds its way out through, like if you look at the Jungian literature, they talk about how the shadow is like a trickster, and it will make you say things in public that, and you realize, whoa, did I say that? You know, it'll make you act self-destructively in ways that you didn't realize that you were doing, and you will start to destroy yourself and get yourself ostracized from a certain group or whatever it is. And you'll do it unconsciously because your shadow, so to speak, is taking over. Some aspect of your personality is wanting to be seen, and you don't have a good relationship with it, and other people don't know that about you either. And so it comes on out, and to disrupt the situation and to cause some chaos that will then give you the opportunity to restructure yourself in a way that's more healthy.
Right, that's the other thing about you. We started out talking about the nature of destruction and chaos and evolution.
Yeah, let's go back to answering that.
And the thing is that doing shadow work gives you the opportunity, or some sort of trauma in your life or challenge in your life or crash gives you that chaos, but gives you the opportunity to take that chaos or that destruction and learn from it and
get wisdom out of it.
Get wisdom and strength and use it
Yep.
as the source, a prima materia in alchemy, the soil for your own evolution.
Yes, right.
So this is why I think it's extremely important for people not to be afraid of the darkness or the challenges or death itself, because all of it is giving you as a soul the opportunity to evolve.
That's right.
And what the Jungians called individuate into your greater nature, your big S self, your genius, right? What you're here to do in the world, what you were born to do.
And then the last thing, maybe just to go back to the very original point, Leslie, about that we're holding on to obsolete views of destruction. In other words, of the dark side of reality. And so if you go back to our in the West, our Christian heritage, we have an understanding of darkness and destruction and chaos and the shadow,
The
that's
devil.
personified in the devil and in the actions of certain characters in the Bible and in our mythology. And if you look really closely and holistically, as holistically as possible, at those descriptions of the dark side of humanity as they're discussed in Christian mythology and theology, it's actually, there's quite a bit there. And I think anthropomorphizing all of our darkness onto the devil, I think the devil has been described in enough ways to really give you enough of a picture of the dark side of humanity for a time, and there was a historical period where that was enough. But where we are now in the modern and postmodern world, where there's been so much destruction by rationality upon the mythological way of viewing the world, that we now have to, you don't just throw out the baby with the bathwater. You don't just throw out the whole understanding of the devil and Lucifer and the dark side of humanity as it was anthropomorphized into those characters. You don't just throw it away and say, oh, that's just mythology. We don't have that. No, you have to use that, and then you have to add new layers onto our more ancient understandings of the human dark side. And then you start to create a holistic picture of the human shadow and human darkness that is more up to date than just what we've had in the West for the last couple thousand years. So we do need to update this.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a while, that I believe eventually there will be a science a spiritual, psychic, and actual science of studying the dark side of the universe.
Yeah, the Jungians have put us on the path to do that, and they've sort of carved out of their whole system quite a good place for the shadow, and they are approaching it somewhat scientifically. But there really needs to be that particular focus just needs to keep growing bigger and bigger.
And it's not to go into the dark side and of reality, and it's not. People are afraid to do that because they think
They're afraid to do what?
Of going into the dark side, right?
Of it going down the rabbit hole,
right.
Taking the red pill.
Because they think there's a fear that you're going to be taken over by this darkness.
And that can happen to people who are kind of already close to psychosis.
Yeah. But if you have if you have a spiritual nature, and this is very important, a moral structure, and an understanding of the greater mystery of what you would call God, the universe, if you have that, it's like a chalice. It's like this greater mystery of being part of the whole of humanity and the universe.
A spiritual connection, a spiritual outlook, yeah.
So with that kind of a feeling or an outlook, I would say it's a whole body, mind experience, then you can go into these areas as your own personal scientist and magician and actually pull out the material that's necessary for you to evolve.
I know when I was little, I kept seeing real dark stuff and I thought something was out to get me. And it took me a while to realize, oh, this is mine. I'm seeing it because this is in me somewhere and it's wanting me to take accountability and responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I think the Satan idea was great for us to have the scapegoat of, here, this is going to take it for me. I'm going to blame it. You know what I mean? And so at a young age, I was trying to come to terms with that while growing up in the church. But shadow was something that I saw almost like an entity. It was like things that I could see. And it took a while, and I was terrified to realize that it needed integrated somehow.
Yeah, she read me your testimony about what you had experienced and how that you are that these psychic that these archetypal movements are becoming are that you can actively see these quote unquote spirits or these archetypal psychic movements or energies anthropomorphized and made clear in your vision and in your space, and it's shamanism. It's shamanistic. It's a shamanistic function, and I have a thicker ego boundary than that, and so it comes through to me more intuitively, or through dreams, or through occurrences and synchronicities that I have to sort of decipher, but not as. And it is people who have this capacity, this like you have, who could be in danger maybe of becoming psychotic if you start to touch on this material too closely because your ego membrane is thinner.
That definitely happened a couple of times where I thought I was like being possessed. And I was able to get through it, but sometimes it felt when I was younger that I was barely going to get through. It was like the last minute and I broke through. So it was terrifying. And I remember because I needed to understand it and explore it, I was that kid that was doing very odd, weird things. And it felt very like being completely alone and isolated because you're that weird kid trying to understand something. And so when I do meet people, one of the fears is you know, we have an instinct to fit in a community, because way back in the day, it was like a death sentence. If you got kicked out of your clan, you didn't know how to find water. And so like, I dealt with that myself. And that's one of the fears that I noticed, is that, and people, again, being scared that it's going to take over them, which, I mean, in a way that did almost happen to me. But I'm glad that I worked through it, because I wouldn't have even understood my light or my strengths or anything had I not.
Of course. Yeah. And this is just part of your path and your genius, is that you have to, you have to experience the psyche in this way, and that you have to understand it and find your own path of being in the world with this way of being, with this shamanistic talent, and you're having to figure out how to use it, how to explore it, how to mature it, stay sane, and then be helpful and give it back to the world.
And seed it back out to others.
Yeah.
That is the shaman
It's
path.
sort of the shamanistic hero's journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's excellent, and it's perfect. But what you were saying about people being afraid to go into this area because they're either afraid that it's going to possess them, or they're going to be ostracized.
Yeah.
Well, you have
natural.
shadow groups where you can start to have environments for people to be able to talk about these things. Just that in itself is good. We have some other tools that we've found, and maybe we can share them with you at some point in this talk, that are extremely powerful to be able to move some of this energy, the emotional body, so that you can actually shrink the trauma.
Yeah, we can talk about how we think about shadow work as work, and what that work is. And
Yeah,
how that work is
because
done.
I think it's people that are drawn to this usually have had some sort of trauma in their life.
Yeah.
Or they've had trauma passed on to them, and they probably do feel more like an outsider. So the more people can experience and have groups like you lead, or we do a Zoom call every 2 weeks, a free Zoom call, and anybody can join, and we just talk about what's going on with people and kind of help support them through this. I think a lot more people are starting to realize that the world as what they thought, especially post COVID, and we don't have
they're being red-pilled, so to speak.
Basically they're being red-pilled. They're saying the world is not what I thought it was, and how did this happen, and where am I? And
which is, it's sort of an archetypal initiation.
Yeah.
It's sort of the threshold. It's kind of the hero's journey threshold, where you go into the non-ordinary world. And but we okay, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say something, but I forgot what it was. I was going to add to what you were saying.
Well, I was just saying
pill thing
that
got me off.
there's just I understand there's a lot more people now, and a lot more younger people now.
I know. Go ahead. Yeah.
Who are having this kind of a dark night of the soul, or
that is happening,
or a breakdown, or a red pilling moment.
Right.
And they're really in need of community, of people sharing these deeper aspects of themselves,
right.
And have to be able to have tools to be able to work through all of this.
Yeah, because the society is not our culture. It's not present. There's not the there's so much change going on so rapidly, and a lot of it is very destructive right now. And so there's not an easy and well worked out path to growing up and going into the world and having your role. And so there's a lot of confusion as to, where do I fit in? And also, back what you were saying is, people who have been traumatized might be, are the ones who are seeking out this kind of information. I think that's pretty universal, because it seems that to do psycho-spiritual work on yourself, that is real psycho-spiritual work, that is actually evolutionary, it's actually going to do something for you, substantive, it requires a lot of shadow work. And the shadow material is naturally caustic to your ego, to your conscious state, to your persona. It's naturally toxic, and it's naturally it's nasty medicine that you have to swallow, and you have to keep swallowing. And so nobody really wants to do it. It's not something that you want to do. It's the kind of thing that you end up doing when you get to a place where you realize, I have to take this nasty medicine. I have to do this work, because if I don't, I'm going to be a wreck, or I'm going to die, or there's just my genius will never be developed. And you get to some place, this is what the dark night of the soul is, you get to some place where you recognize, I just got too much neurosis, too much pathology, too much hurt, too much anxiety, too much whatever, however you want to put it, pathological. I'm too messed up, and I need to work on myself, or else it's not going to work out for me, or I'm going to end up destroying everybody around me, blah, blah, blah. So you have to kind of get to a state, kind of a rock bottom state, before you will start doing this work, because it's not comfortable. Once you get into it, and once it becomes a part of your life, then like any kind of training that's difficult, any kind of training, right?
A training, an athletic sport. We call our version of the way we do shadow work as like the extreme sport version of doing shadow work.
But I think it's the only way to do it. The other ways that are sort of like 1, 2, 3, ABC kind of stuff is just, that's not really even doing the work. It's not deep enough. It's not really going to get you that far. It's a primer. It's going to get you a little ways. It's going to get you introduced. But yeah, so it's like any training where
Right.
At first it's like a boot camp or whatever in the military, and it's very hard at first, but then as it becomes part of your life, then we're all doing things in life that are very hard, and we're all trying to surmount challenges, and they're very difficult. So we're all always doing very hard stuff. It's just that we're not very, Westerners especially, and modern people are not very oriented inwardly. And so when you say, I'm going to do this, I have this challenging work to do, it's not like a challenging work that you can, raising a family or building a business or something like that, where you can look out in the world and you can have examples of other people who are doing it, and you can kind of say, okay, well, I'm on track here, and that, those people are doing it, I can do it, I can read books about how it's done, and it's sort of all in the light. Most challenges that are exoteric challenges are at least somewhat explored by other people, and we can learn from them, we can overcome the challenges because we have examples. But when you're talking about the inner work, and especially we come from a society or a culture, a civilization that has been so exoteric for so long, it's really like going into a cave that's really mostly unexplored. And so there are maps and understandings out there, but they're esoteric and they're not well known. And the sort of gatekeepers of society will tell you to stay away from those things, and because they don't have any familiarity with them. And so you really have to kind of go it alone, and then and that really pushes people away from doing this work, because you really have to depend on yourself and trust yourself and sort of develop your own path, and you're kind of in a mode of being a pioneer in a way. There are pioneers before us. There are inner workers, that go all the way back. It is on the shaman line, but there's not enough of it in our civilization to where you will feel you won't feel completely supported, and so it requires a lot of there has to be a certain confidence and a warrior's will to kind of get through this.
That's kind of why we're saying it's like very extreme athletic training, because in order to do extreme athletic training, you do have to have a very strong warrior.
Yeah, that has to be
very conscientious, constantly be turning what you see outside in your outside world and triggers and things that trigger you out there, and turn them inwards, and always have a question, a why that's going on in part of your psyche. You're always asking questions. Why did I respond to that? Oh, did they get dropped off?
I don't know. Maybe. Let's see here. It says it's recording still.
Are you folks there?
Yep. Shadow Shaman. Oh, look. She even has Shadow Shaman. She'll come back on in a second. They just lost their video. You guys back?
Lost your video?
We can't hear you that well either. You're cutting out, Leslie, your voice. Still, you guys are... It'll come back. Let's just hang for a minute. I think you're still recording, though. It still says recording, so that's good.
Yeah, it's still recording.
There you are.
Okay, so it's coming back now. Your video's there.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And your video is here back too.
Yes. Great.
Okay, so no, go right ahead with your go right ahead. That we're done saying what we were going to say there.
Yeah. So you said something that I couldn't agree more. If I could agree twice, I would agree twice, and 3 and 4 and 5 times. It's that it requires a certain level of destruction of the self. That the more inward you go, the more destruction of the self for a new self to come in, a better, more improved one. But what seems like in today's day and age, we are deathly scared of just complete, utter destruction of rotten foundations. We just are. But ironically, that's exactly what's going on. Like, modern day therapy is losing its appeal. Like, somebody would tell you, oh, you got 45 to 50 weeks here sitting on this couch, $300 to $400 an hour, sometimes more in like certain states. And I sat down with a psychiatrist once, and then she started telling me about all this kind of work that she did. It's like, oh yeah, therapy, you just go back childhood regression for like, and that's like only like week 40. How much is your hourly rate? Oh, 500 pounds.
Oh.
And I'm like, you do that in 40 weeks? There's gotta be a...
Yeah. It's completely parasitic. It's set up like a corporation with a profit motive and all of that and everything. And for sure, the entire huge swaths of our civilization and the infrastructure and the way our civilization is structured, the way it is now, the public side of things is totally cracked and basically obsolete, and it's just, and so right, and so that the mental health therapy models that are out there, they're for the most part, they're
generally
garbage.
Yeah, there's a few great people out there like Gabor Mate.
There are, of course, always individuals who are very high level and second tier or higher level people that are out there that are brilliant and helpful, and there's going to be people that you don't even know about. There's going to be great people that are mixed in, but I kind of think that as you're probably going to find most practitioners, most people who are in any kind of therapeutic or healing modality, probably the quality practitioners, the real people with wisdom, are probably going to be mostly outside of the system. They're going to be taking cash, not insurance. They're going to have their own private practice somewhere, and you're going to find out about them through word of mouth or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that anyone who has the will and the desire and has a sense of self-responsibility can do incredibly deep work, inner work on themselves that will have very positive effects in their life.
Yeah.
It just takes
Well, not anyone can do it. There's always going to be a role for the therapist to be a sort of a coach or a surrogate parent, a facilitator for people who don't naturally have enough of the talents to go deep enough alone.
Yeah, but
there will always be that need.
The idea, even if you are a facilitator, and a lot of people that we end up coaching or people that we've helped out are facilitators, are coaches, or teachers. These are the people that need to have these practices, this more deeper shadow work practices. They need to be doing this on themselves in order to be able to give that information and the powerful work to their patients and the people they're helping.
And just a big chunk of the population who are, intelligent enough, introspective enough, curious enough, and have enough of some willpower that they can do it too. And they just have to kind of get over the hump of thinking that they need someone else, because I think there's a large chunk of people who don't really, they might meet with somebody here or there or whatever, but there's everything that you kind of need to know to get you going on this self-healing path is out there. It's in books, it's in audio lectures, and you can sort of check in with other people who are older and more experienced to kind of see where you are. And some people will need a facilitator, a therapist, but a lot of people just don't, and they just need to kind of figure it out that you don't need anyone else. You just,
gotta do it.
Just got to do it.
Well, it's using your life as your own scientific evolutionary experiment.
Yeah.
If you have the desire and the will to use your life and all your challenges and all your successes as a way to develop yourself and get you more connected to the source of where you come from, which is the source, which is giving you your own personal genius of what it is that you're here to do. You can do it.
Oh, yeah.
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 He taught me pattern removal. So when he met me, I was doing lots of shadow work, and it's like I emotionally, mentally, and psychologically understood this and that and why, but I still didn't understand why it kept showing up. And he was like, oh, it's literally like a computer virus, a pattern, an energetic download that's still moving. You haven't actually cleared it out of the body, even though I understood it so well, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like making love to my wounds, but wanting to heal at the same time. And it was really counteractive. Like, I want to heal, but I love it, don't want to let it go. So he started teaching me the actual, so because with the psychic abilities we have, we can see the patterns in other people, and easier to see in other people than yourself, right? And so he would start teaching me how to clear them out. And that's when I noticed that my life actually started shifting from, I fully understand this, to it's literally, my reality's changing. It was like an extra step I had to find. And what I thought was amazing about it is I've been doing this for so long, and then I'm like, you're really never done. It was like a whole new world of shadow work. And I'm only 33 years old. So I'm like, this is exciting. And I've done it all. I was the church girl, and I painted one of my paintings with my own blood. I can't even tell you. I can't even tell you why. I was just going into exploring this, and nobody understood it. But it felt important at the time. And then here I am. I've published a couple of books. I'm doing shadow work facilitation. My reality is changing. People are changing, not because I'm making them change, but because I'm changing. So everything's changing around me. And then just knowing that I'm only 33 and there's so much I still don't know and I haven't created yet, it starts to become fun. It's not, now it's becoming fun.
Okay. Well, yeah, I would say that it is, if there's, well, first of all, if there's, Robert Moore was talking about this, if there's not fun in your life, if you're not having fun, if there's not a space for fun, the lover archetype to be in there, then you definitely need to start to do things to give you, to start having fun. There has to be, fun has to be in your life to be healthy, absolutely. But to me, the way I think about shadow, okay, well, first of all, most people will not see any kinds of viruses. They will not see any kinds of entities. They'll show up in dreams. Something might flash.
There'll be a psychosomatic illness or some symptom.
Most people will not see any of that.
There'll be an emotional depression.
There'll be all kinds of effects of shadow repression, but they won't actually be able to see anything or anything like that. And so there's going to be a lot of deduction of what's going on in me through understanding some model, like if we're using the Jungian model, kind of being able to picture things, okay, that kind of makes sense. Looking at dreams, looking at synchronicities, looking at occurrences that happen in your outer world as reflections of psychic processes in yourself, looking at people that come into your world, and when someone comes into your world, you project things onto them, and you see that person this way or that way. And then by noticing your projections, you can basically start to get access to what it is that is going on in here. It's sort of a deductive way. And so most of us are going to be looking at the effects of shadow repression and all of that, and not actually seeing that or even dreaming it very often or whatever. So, and then also when you're actually in the place where you have the most capacity to evolve, that is going to usually be the time when you're in the most turmoil, and that's not going to be fun. And so it's going to be the turmoil is going to be what the conflict in life is going to be, the place that cracks the ego enough to where something can come in. And then it's going to be your contemplation upon the conflict and the contemplation and analysis of the conflict that's going to continue that integration process. And then through doing the shadow work, and we'll talk about how we do it and what we do and all that, but then more psychic space is opened up to have fun. So I myself can't call shadow work fun because it arises out of turmoil, and and then it progresses through analytical work. But the fun is sort of a byproduct of healing yourself.
Absolutely.
But
Probably
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The one thing I think it's fun is because the introspective parts of the brain becomes a curiosity almost. Like you start understanding that the mind, in fact, has the subconscious, the unconscious, and then the body trauma responses, and then going through them, sometimes the answers are so surprising that, you know, you might have thought you had an idea at the beginning, but then it comes out to be like, oh no.
My nervous system doesn't think it's fun ever. I'm always in recovery.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
there you go. There you go.
My nervous
There you
system is
go.
always in recovery.
Yeah,
I just
there you
want
go.
to discover.
That's
Yeah,
right.
no, for individuals, like it's kind of like doing push-ups. Like at
Yeah.
one point you start hurting and it sucks, but
Yes.
later you look at you admire your work. And you're like, oh, you know, training sucks, but then here I am strong, and
then boom, here
I
it
do
goes again.
still find, like, I don't want to call that morbid curiosity, but almost like a very much curiosity of where those patterns really are at the brain.
Yes.
For the strangers or for myself. And again, my nervous systems may be like shot and tired. I might have had like an anger episode on finding out why that was happening. But the patterns, like, oh, for example, that came back when I was that time when I was little. I did not even think that was like why I was angry about X, Y, and Z. Or somebody said a comment that stung and it left a residue. And I'm like, why did that, you know, made me really angry? And then I look back into a deep into the trenches in the unconscious, like, oh, that's exactly why. It's because this time I got rejected, or this time I had an embarrassment, or this time I had a humiliation, or or somebody like stunted my happiness, or at that moment, it's always, that's the part that's probably fun, even though it doesn't feel fun.
That's because you have the magician archetype running through you.
Yeah, that curiosity and that inclination to investigate, that investigative, curious detective work and scientific analysis work that you're talking about, that is a prerequisite talent that has to be there enough to be able to do this work. And in the same way that any artist has to have sort of a natural built-in talent, they can build on that talent, or any scientist has to have a certain talent that you can. And so, yes, it's to do this work, you have to have that introspective magician.
Actually, that's one of the things that we talk about as like the first thing.
It's kind of the first thing.
The awareness.
The awareness.
And the curiosity, which is in Robert Moore's model, or the Jungian model, that is the magician archetype.
Yes.
And so if you don't have a strong magician archetype, you can build that archetype by a certain kind of awareness.
Yep.
That's basic mindfulness, right? So
we're going to write this down now as number one. If you're saying, okay, well, how do we do shadow work? Let's just start with where we are right now. Number one starts with awareness.
Awareness.
Keeping everybody is kind of going back and forth between getting sucked into life and getting embroiled in what they're doing and concentrating on what they're doing, and then pulling back and analyzing that and say, what am I doing here? What and that's that higher state of awareness, that contemplative awareness is what we call the watcher. It's the
mindfulness in the East, they call it.
It's the most, it's when you're meditating and you're just sitting there and you're watching thoughts and feelings come up, you see thoughts passing through your head and all this. It's not just when you're meditating, it's when you're in life. Thoughts are passing, feelings are passing, and images and memories are coming up. But who is watching the memory? Who's the person in the movie theater watching this movie play out? That's the watcher. That's the highest point of awareness of human consciousness that can self-reflect. And it's the I part. It's the I. And so we go back and forth between the I of just awareness and just being aware, and then getting sucked into something, into some activity, or getting sucked into a memory, getting sucked into a pattern, getting sucked into a conflict, and losing yourself in
Colin
the
Wilson
pattern.
calls this the robot.
Yeah, getting sucked back into the robot, into your automatic responses and all of that, being triggered and just automatically, and then you back off and you go, oh, what am I doing here? So awareness is the mindfulness, developing the watcher is basically just, there's nothing super special about it. Everybody's doing it. It's just trying to become more aware and being an analyst and basically treating yourself as basically you're in your picture of your reality, which is visual and auditory and sensory in every way, plus the things that are coming up in the psyche, the memories and the thoughts and all of that. That's what's on the movie screen. That's reality as a movie screen. And the watcher part is the person who's sitting in the seat watching the movie. And what a lot of people do, most people do, is when they go in and sit down and watch a movie, they fall into the movie. They start to empathize with one of the characters maybe, and they get attached to it. And then the movie just goes by, and they're not even aware, oh, I have half my popcorn's uneaten, and they're, oh yeah, they wake up for a second and then they fall back into the movie. And so what the alchemist, what the inner magician is doing, what the person who's doing this work is doing, is they're sitting in the chair as an actual film director. They're sitting in the chair watching,
or a co-director,
but as a director. And so, for example, what goes through the mind of Steven Spielberg or Francis Ford Coppola when they go to a movie one of their colleagues created, and they go sit down in the theater to go watch a movie that another great movie that somebody else created? How they're looking at it. From the second the movie starts and the credits start showing up, they're like, oh, there's all kind of different formats for putting credits out there. They look at that and they go, oh yeah, he used that method. And then they look at the way the opening scene is, and they go, oh yeah, I recognize they probably use such and such studio over in such and such place. And then they look at the wide angle view of a panoramic view, and oh yeah, that's about a however many millimeter field of view or whatever, and they start analyzing the movie as a director, right? That's what the director does to a movie. And so that's what we're doing. We're analyzing our lives and the whole projection of life from the point of view of a director and trying to back engineer it, understand it, and from many different angles. Now, some directors will look at a movie and they won't be as interested in the technical details of the cinematography. They'll be more interested in how the story was written and how the story really culminated and climaxed, and whether or not it was a compelling story or how well that director told an archetypal story. And they'll be looking at it more along those lines and maybe more from a feeling state. Other directors will be more technical about the way it was done technically and all of that. So each person, you guys, us, anybody else that's doing work like this, is going to have their own slant. Like every director has their own artistic, personal, subjective way. But what we're all doing the same is that we're all analyzing, that we're all being aware of the details.
It's awareness, mindfulness. There's always a question, and there's always an energetic, you're slightly out. There's always this watcher part that's watching your life as you're experiencing.
And if you fall away from that and move into unconsciousness, you wake up and you start looking at what was going on in my head and body for the last 10 seconds when I was unconscious. Oh, okay, that's where I am. All right. So that's the first thing, is just general awareness. Now, general awareness is not shadow work per se. So this is how you can have all these Eastern meditative practices and entire religious disciplines and Zen Buddhism and all of this that are focused on awareness in passive meditation and awareness in active life, but that are not focused on the shadow. you develop this awareness, you have this whole thing, but shadow work is something that's more.
Then that would be phase 2,
That's phase
which
2.
is to start to notice how you're being triggered by other people,
Right.
by relationships,
Right.
by the culture, by things that are going on in the world, and start to note, and then also just negative feelings that
Right.
are going on.
Right.
And with that awareness that you've developed, you flip it and you mirror it back into yourself. So say I wake up and I just feel tired and I have a sense of anxiety. Instead of just getting up and having a cup of coffee or
Getting busy.
I will say, oh, I have anxiety in my body. Where is that coming from?
Right.
What does that feel like?
Right.
So you start to notice, and if you're really a scientist, like we're saying that anybody who does this is their own personal scientist, researcher, then you might want to start writing down things that these triggers.
Yeah.
Start making a list,
You
right?
start focusing on it's normal. Mindfulness is just focusing on it, is just studying everything that's coming up in the movie of life and just looking at it from some kind of perspective. But then the shadow work, as it goes into this, then that's focusing on things that are uncomfortable to focus on. That's where you're saying, okay, well, some of this material that's coming up in myself, whether it's feelings, whether it's thoughts, whether it's images and memories, or whether it's things going on in the world, some of what's in my awareness, some percentage of it, let's say 10% of it or whatever percent, is stuff that kind of sucks, kind of is not comfortable to look at, is scary to look at, or makes me feel bad, or makes me feel guilty or fearful or anxious or whatever. And that's where you start to go, whether this, and if you can stay on this is whether or not you can make it through the boot camp of this deeper work, is that can you train yourself, and you can, to start to tolerate your own garbage, tolerate your own pathology, tolerate your own self-destructive thoughts and feelings, tolerate your destructive impulses, tolerate your reactiveness,
your own borderline or narcissistic behaviors, or
tolerate it all.
Tolerate it all, and
look at it, analyze it like everything else you're analyzing, put it in your book, write it down.
And this can be psychosomatic, aches, pains,
physical stuff, and just starting to, and then how deep you go with it, and how often you go into it. Let's say you had a bad relationship with your mother, and your mother just died a couple years ago, and you never really reconciled with your mother. Okay, well, there's going to be a lot of junk there. That's going to be a bag of garbage in the closet that's rotting away. And you're going to see things in life that's going to bring up your mother. And sometimes maybe it's going to move you into a state of remembering how much you loved her. But maybe other things are going to bring you into a state of remembering how much you hated her, or she tortured you, or you just she made just whatever your negative responses were to her. And if you had that kind of relationship with her. And so now you're going to have to go through that big bag of leftover junk that has all your negative mother stuff. And there's going to be positive mother stuff in there too, that you're going to be like, oh, I forgot about this. This is really positive, and I really loved that aspect of my mother, and that was a way in which my mother really nurtured me, and I forgot that was in the bag too. And so you're going to have to now go through the garbage. You have to spread it all out on the floor, and you don't do it all in one day. You don't do it all in 1 year. and you start picking up the pieces and you go reanalyze those things and you feel those things.
Yeah, and that gets to number 3, which I think
I don't know if we're
well,
totally,
I don't know if this is like exactly 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
but this is
Okay, we'll go. You can go to 3 now if you want.
because I think that this particular tool is,
I was gonna say emotional. I was gonna say relationship conflicts.
well, that leads to the next thing that I was about to talk
But
to.
let me
right?
just quickly add
Okay.
then the relationship conflict, because kind of number 3 is kind of, this is kind of a finale kind of.
Okay.
So yeah, and I don't think I've really made it clear enough of how of going through your garbage. So the other thing is, besides, so your mother comes up and then you start to have to build tolerance for going into the bag that has all your mother's stuff in it, and then your father's stuff, and then your other stuff, your brother and sister stuff, or your old, whatever it is, whatever it is in life that triggers something old, you just say, okay, it's like cleaning out the refrigerator. It's like, I got to clean out this refrigerator. It's totally packed. There's all kinds of rotten, leaking stuff in there. And every day I'm going to pull one thing out and I'm going to look at it and go, what was the expiration date of this? And smell it and go, oh, wow, ugh, yeah, wow, okay, I'm going to remember that, and then kind of put that away. And if that ever comes back again, keep looking at it. Write about it, think about it, write a song about it, tell your friends about it, tell a family member about it. However, do it what Jungians call active imagination about it, and play with it, and keep playing with that ugly thing in one way or another, and revisiting it and feeling it until it starts to lose its charge. And it'll take some time. If it's a very powerful thing, it'll take years to kind of reduce its charge down to where it's not accosting you, or it's not posing a problem anymore. So this is just the general practice of taking inventory of and accepting and allowing all the old stuff that's back there, that you allow it to present itself, and then you analyze it and accept it and work through it. And the way in which you do it could be your own way of doing it, you kind of your own thing, but just the general practice of focusing on what is uncomfortable and unacceptable previously, and making bringing it up. And if it's seen as an active personality, well, then you're making a truce with that entity, and you're having a relationship with that entity, that part of you, and it's just coming to terms with and relating to and accepting everything that was shoved back. And it's an active process of work. So that's just the general shadow work. And then the last thing I was going to add before we go into what you're going to say is that conflicts in relationships are also, or personal cycles of chronic cycles, whether they're chronic cycles of physical cycles of pain, or whether they're addictive cycles where you find yourself sucked into an eating addiction or a substance addiction or whatever kind of addiction, and you're cycling, and you're going into a period of euphoria, and then you're falling back down into despair or whatever it is, or you're doing it with your partner and she or he is triggering some aspect of you that's wounded and that hasn't been brought up yet, and there's still a charge around it. And so the trigger or the cycle is starting with your partner, or it could be somebody at work or wherever it is with another person. That cycle is running. And if you get fired or you quit that job, then you're going to stop turning it with that person at work, and you're going to turn it with the person somewhere else. And so you study the cycle. You study what triggers the cycle, what kind of behavior in other people or what kind of environmental stimulus triggers the cycle, and you study the ramp up of the cycle, the peak of the cycle, the feelings of the cycle, what it feels like at the top, what it feels like at the bottom, and you just start to analyze and accept all of that. So this is the same category of focusing on what's uncomfortable, but it's not just stuff that comes up randomly, but it's stuff that comes up as part of these chronic cycling. And in Jungian theory, these are autonomous complexes, basically, is what they're described as, that sort of have us. They have a hold of us, and they're going to force our egos through a little mini life cycle.
Yeah, and they are autonomous.
Yeah.
And they're parasitic.
You could say that.
Yeah, and they have a feeding cycle.
They have a feeding cycle.
And so, and they feed on these trauma breaks in our psyche.
Eckhart Tolle calls this the system that creates these destructive cycles the pain body.
Yeah.
And the pain, right? And so the pain body is sort of the tapestry of somewhat parasitic complexes that are formed out of your trauma, your ancestors' trauma, breaks, developmental difficulties in life. I guess you call it developmental trauma, and segments of the psyche that have become autonomous, and they have needs. Energy needs, like any living thing needs its food, and they need attention. They need to be seen, and so they will present themselves. And in a relationship, your pain body will sort of after the initial phase of the relationship, the two pain bodies will kind of merge into a relationship with each other, and then they will take turns, kind of cycling you in.
Yeah, most relationships, especially if and usually you're attracted to other people who have the same similar complexes that you have, so that at first you're being attracted to each other's genius.
Yeah, animus anima projection, they call it.
But you're also, your individual pain bodies are being attracted, and they're gonna play with each other.
Yeah, your light side and your dark side, they both have a
Yeah.
so it's not two people. You guys, it's not two people in a relationship. It's four people in a relationship. So it's actually many more than four people.
Yeah,
but if you broke it down to a very simplistic way, it's the conscious part of you that's, you guys are having a relationship, a conscious relationship, and then there's an unconscious part of you where there's all this other primal stuff and just unconscious animal stuff and all this. And then there's also pain body stuff, shadow stuff, where you guys are kind of, your own pain bodies have kind of found a way of working together, and they kind of tag team you, and they throw you guys for a loop, and you guys trigger each other. And so if you notice how when one person triggers the other person, you can notice how that before the conflict started, that there will be, one of the people will have a state of anxiety. There will be a state of dis-ease in the one person, whether it's the person who started the fight or not. And at least one of the people will have, the pain body will be active. And you'll notice that the pain body's active. And really, if one person tries to start the conflict and the other person doesn't go along with it, their pain body isn't up at the time. It's not active at the time. And so it won't catch fire. And so they'll be like, what are you talking about? No, I'm not playing that game. And then the other person will try to force you into a conflict, but it just won't work. And so then it will hold off for a while, for a few hours or a few days. And then when the pain body is active, then it'll start to play again. And so this is this. And so you won't be able to do this kind of, there's the shadow work. It's all awareness work. And then it's integration work of getting in touch with things that are uncomfortable and that arise naturally in life. And then there's a special category of stuff that arises when you're in a cyclical conflict, when you have a complex that's running or a pain body that's running. And that's another type of shadow work. It's included in general shadow work, but it's a cycling, triggering.
That happened
type of
earlier to us.
complex.
I labeled it. I was like, wait a minute, this is my pain body speaking.
Yeah.
I did it to him earlier. And he's like, where's this coming from? And I'm like, this is my pain body. This is my shadow right now. And I just let him know, like, hey, I'm acting.
Good.
Right.
That's
off Dark Leslie over what happened a year ago is here right now. So that's who you're speaking to.
Right.
That's right.
Knowing who's at the wheel right now, you know, and being starting to label it. Like I recognize, oh, if I see it, I see it.
There was one day you mentioned that I was gonna add to it. Is you said, oh yeah, it's like you're aware watching the movie, aware of it, but then it goes automatically back up because it's something painful. And I was thinking, it's like, yeah, there's that one, and there's the more dangerous one, in my opinion, which is when you're not even aware of it and it goes numb. You go numb to it, and it's automatic. It goes undetected.
That's right. That's okay. So that's a complex. That's what's happening when you're in one of these relational conflicts. But it can happen. It can be triggered by something outside, by somebody at the gas station or wherever. But in Jungian theory, they call the pain body. Eckhart Tolle's not totally clear about this, but he does say it clear enough, I think, that the pain body is sort of a collection of different complexes that are triggered off of in different ways in life. They're kind of like, let's say there's 5 main complexes that were all kind of either passed to you or everybody will have a different. Who knows what the number
call
of them
it
is.
pain body profile.
Yeah, everybody will have a pain body profile, and those nodes of the pain body will kind of present themselves, when they can. And in Jungian theory, they call these autonomous complexes or splinter psyches.
And then there's another practice called IFS. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah,
this is
a good book to kind of get into
internal family systems.
Internal family systems model. This is a good book that's very basic. It's kind of like a kid's book in a way, but it introduces you to the model of IFS, internal family systems. It's another way of looking at autonomous complexes or the pain body. And
it's parts
as parts of your psyche. And so when a complex or a node of the pain body gets activated, it will rise to a level in the ego, in your consciousness, of where it takes over. And you said we go numb, you just blank out. And and now the pain body is it's in the driver's seat. The complex is running you now. And so then as you become more and more aware, and you do more awareness work and you do more shadow work, you get to the point to where every time you're taken over by a complex or the pain body and it's trying to run the vehicle, drive the bus, then you will be able to maintain a watcher that will watch it, and it will watch you say things to your partner that you wouldn't normally say. You'll watch yourself say and do things and react and overreact and get over dramatic and slam the door, and you'll be like, yeah, okay, that's over dramatic, and you can watch yourself being dramatic. The watcher doesn't go away. Now the watcher can't stop the complex. The watcher cannot stop the pain body.
At first.
No, at first can't. No. And so it just watches. And then you can later apologize and make up and talk about what happened and what was triggered, and you can go through a whole analysis of it. But over time of doing this work, the watcher will show up when it's always there, and the complex will show up. The watcher will see, okay, I'm getting triggered, here it comes, and blah, blah, blah. And then it can choose whether to fall into the conflict or whether to opt out. And that's where we can get into this next step that can be done anytime, but it is very powerful when you're in the middle of a conflict. If the watcher is strong enough and can see the thing running, then the watcher can opt out from getting involved in the pain body cycle and go process the emotions that are behind the pain body cycle.
You can do this.
This would be number 3, I guess.
You can do this process. It's extremely simple. Anytime you're triggered, not just with relationship or this
Right.
cyclical,
Anytime you're doing shadow work, just being aware.
but anytime in your life,
Yep.
you get a strong trigger, which triggers an emotional response. You get angry, you get fearful, you get sad. Right at that moment, you turn it within yourself. You sit down by yourself.
Right.
And if this is in a relationship conflict, when you're aware that the pain body is there, you say to your partner, I'm going to process this now. Now, sit down.
If the partner isn't aware, if they're not doing this work, the partner will not let you go be alone.
Yes.
Their pain body will be active and they'll try to stop you.
So you may have to do this slightly.
You might have to wait until the complex has the cycles has come down.
But the sooner that you can do it, when you have that emotional trigger in your body.
Yeah, when it's in you.
Instead of distracting away from the trigger and doing something else or doing some addictive activity or whatever, just pushing it out, you sit in the emotional content of the fear, the grief, the anger, and you just let it move through your entire body. You let it process the full emotion. And at first it sounds very easy, but at first there's so much material behind. It's like a wound, right? There's been a wound in you that has blocked energy. It's blocked. And so
that's where that node of the pain body arose in the first place.
Right.
Was where there was a slice, a wound, a fracture in your psychic continuity. And it busted through. Basically the complex is almost serving a function to get stuff moving that couldn't move, shadow material, you could say, to move, that wasn't able to move in a healthy way. And it is now in a very unhealthy and crazy chaotic way, just causing this breakthrough. And so you've got to get back down to where this blocked energy is, and you've got to basically start to consciously coax it out.
So you allow the emotion, instead of pushing it away, you allow it to take over your body in that moment. And what happens if it starts with anger, like intense anger?
Yeah, you just had a fight with somebody. You're sitting in your car out in the driveway or whatever, right? And you're like, okay, what the hell just happened? Blah blah blah. And you probably feel angry.
Right.
That's probably what's on top, right?
Right. So on top is anger. Now, you don't want to physically punch walls or anything like that. You just want to let that anger take you over. You may get red, but the anger will cycle into possibly grief.
Yeah, you'll also be seeing what just happened in your mind's eye, and you'll be going through the scene, and you might even be recalling past memories, and garbage will be going on in your image space. But what you want to do is bring your attention back to the anger in the body. Okay,
Right.
All these images are going, and blame games are going, and he said, she said's going, but you just go, okay, I know that's going. Go back to the anger, and you go back to the body part.
Right, and you just let it go through your body. You can do an active imagination where you can imagine you as a small child that is very angry or
Having
fell
a temper
over,
tantrum.
having a temper tantrum, right? So you're gonna just hold the child and allow the child to process
Right.
that full emotion.
Right.
So you let that take you over, and most of the time it will turn into grief and tears.
That'll be
and
the next
crying.
wave.
Yeah.
You'll allow the anger to give way to a more feminine emotion like grief, fear, guilt, self, a sense of shame.
But
Those kinds of feelings.
But the physiological effects will be your body wants to release it, so you will probably cry.
Yeah, and then you'll cry.
You will cry a lot.
And then
at
you need to
first.
allow yourself
And
to
you
cry
allow yourself.
until the flowing just naturally, it just, like a child. A child just cries and she cries and she cries, and then she starts to stop crying and it kind of sputters out and then it just stops. You allow yourself to cry for as long as you physically can. It might be 5 minutes. If it's not 5 minutes, you're still blocking a lot. And so you need to keep practicing it. But it could be up to an hour or two.
Yeah, that's when you're really getting to a lot of deep emotional
Yeah.
blocked energy.
Yeah.
So when you first try it or you're first doing it, you may not get a lot of material at
Right.
first. But
Try to force yourself to cry for at least 5 minutes.
Yeah, and if you just use this as a practice, it shrinks this charge,
Right.
and it actually starts to heal the emotional body.
Right.
I cannot stress how powerful this tool
Yep.
is. We developed it to using the trigger in the moment, but the guy that we got the initial process from is John Ruskin, and he wrote a book called Emotional Clearing, and he does it in meditation practice. He gets people into a mindfulness state, then the material comes up and you allow the material to go through the same way. But we found, just because our shadow work, we call it the extreme.
Well, it's relational.
It's relational with relationships like interpersonal relationships, but also relational with any triggers in our outer world.
Right. So whenever you're triggered, that's the moment, that's the doorway into the emotional body. You allow the emotions to move, the anger, the grief. If it's shame, or if it could be fear in the solar plexus, it could be in your gut. It could be a deep sense of existential fear. And whatever the emotion is, it has a location in the body, and you allow it to move itself, and you allow it to passively make you cry or just feel the fear, feel the anger, and just feel it as much as possible. So now what you're doing is you're training at the physiological, at the neuronal level, at the physiological, at the hormonal level, the psychic level. You're training your mind body to be able to process this emotional material in a way that is
Safe.
is totally safe, doesn't destroy the world, doesn't destroy you, and allow it to move. So in the way that our other shadow work was awareness work and analysis work, you could sort of see that as a kind of the prefrontal kind of cognitive. This is the limbic system. This is the mammalian brain. It's emotional, and so you have to have. So this is basically emotional analysis. How can you come to know an emotion that you don't feel? So in order to analyze or integrate an emotional state of being, it has to be felt. It has to come through the body.
And
imagine with thinking, I'm starting to think about all that junk with my mother or my father or whatever, and I get halfway into it and I just stop and I walk away. That wouldn't be good. That's not completing the work. Well, it's the same thing with the emotional stuff. Oh, I got the emotion flowing. Here it is. I'm not just going to stop and go get a pizza or whatever. I'm going to stay with it all the way until it moves, until it peters out.
Now,
you just develop this, you put this into your life, and you just do it all the time. And this just becomes part of life.
So this can be challenging at first because we, as humans, and to survive when we had predators, or when we had challenges, we would die if we acted emotionally at a particular moment, right? Same with pain. We want to get away from pain. We don't want to feel pain.
And our parents in our society often teach us to shut up, stop crying, especially boys. Don't cry, and shove it down. And so we close off those pathways.
But so, with emotional pain, at first, it can feel extremely strong, like heartbreak. If you have trauma, PTSD, in my case, I always used to say there's like, I have a hole in my heart, right? When I started to do the emotional processing, starting to really allow that heartbreak, that abandoned child, to be able to process that grief, it's quite overwhelming. But by doing it, what happens is that my emotional body and my reactions and actions in the world become more balanced, and I don't have to recreate these cycles in my outer world. I can actually become aware of the energy or the cycle and grasp it and not create it in my relationship.
Right.
And then just process the emotion before I even have a conflict.
Right, so the pain body node or the complex is active. You notice it in yourself. It wants to trigger the other person. And so before you get into a fight with them, you go back in the bedroom and you sit on the bed and you allow the emotional energy to come up and you process it. You stay in there for about 10 minutes and you process. And then you come back.
And after a certain point in time, I mean, we've been doing this now for about 9 years, like nonstop, whenever we get triggered. And at this point, I can process the emotional material without anybody even knowing, in a public space. So
like a little tear comes out of your eye.
Right.
And just kind of process it in just like a little mini 30-second little process.
Right. So we cannot recommend this process enough.
It's probably even more, in fact, for people that don't have the analytical mind, we probably should have even said this in the beginning, but probably everyone that watches you guys has an analytical thing. But people who aren't as analytical, they can just learn this. And because, because get down to the emotional stuff, the emotional material is more powerful than cognitive material.
And this emotional material that's blocked is having an effect on your whole system.
Yeah.
You will also find that it can relieve psychosomatic illness or pain.
Yes.
Sometimes after you really do emotional processing, you release a lot of material, maybe not immediately, but the next day you'll feel like you might have a spiritual experience, or you'll feel lighter.
Yeah. Especially in the beginning.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful, incredibly simple, and anyone can do it. It doesn't matter what you know about spirituality or shadow work or whatever.
It makes me think of switching from being the victim of our emotions to understanding we're the creator of it, by being willing to practice with the emotional body itself to understand Because now one of the things I do, if an emotion's coming up in some way that I don't like, I go to, okay, what part of me is creating this emotion? But I used to be a victim to my emotions, right? And now it's like, oh, what part of me is creating this emotion to begin with? So, but that's taken a lot of practice and a willingness to be I've had to let myself just have the panic attack or just let the chest burn and it's uncomfortable. That part sucks, but it's like necessary.
Yes, that's what you're doing.
That's what
when
you're doing. That's what this process, and I think you're gonna get a lot from the IFS system. This is just like a $15 book, but a lot of IFS books, like a lot of scholarly books, are very expensive, but this one is, there's also another one called An Introduction to Internal Family Systems. What Richard Schwartz discovered, the guy who came up with this, is he was doing family therapy, and this kind of therapy, and I wasn't too aware of this kind of therapy, you invite the family members into the therapy because the whatever the pathology is that's going on for the client has got tentacles in all the family members, and everybody's playing the game together. And so he brought in, and so he noticed that that different family members were taking on different roles. It's kind of good cop, bad cop, or one person was giving this energy, another was giving that energy. And so then he realized that these family members are being internalized in us. And so when we grow up, we now are walking around with an internalized family member. And
it's just another way, like you said before, to make these autonomous complexes actually start to have relationships with them. Because in each of us, we have an organic, alive, operating system of parts within us. And they all have different needs and desires and pathologies, right? So if you can start to notice the particular part and how they operate, you can start to work with them.
In that system, he has 3 categories of parts. So the wounded part is called an exile. That's the wounded part. That's the part that hurts when she gets touched, and that's the hurting part. And then you have the manager parts. And the managers are sort of the ones who are helping you organize your life in a way to protect the wounded parts. And then there's firefighters. The firefighters are the ones that come in to distract away from when a wounded part starts to get triggered, and they come in and try to put out the fire.
I actually incorporate my 4-year-old. I've been getting my daughter, my 4-year-old Milena, to do shadow work.
Oh, that's
okay.
excellent.
And finding her own way, and encouraging her to share her observations of me or him or the cat or the house, just because it's allowing me to see how her conclusions are coming. And so I think that's something neat that we can give to younger generations, to start presenting this to even children.
Oh, it's excellent.
In a way that is healthy for them to start this work, like conscious parenting.
Eckhart Tolle says this, that we should talk with our family, our children, about our pain bodies, and invite our children. And in fact, for doing this with children, I would recommend the Eckhart Tolle system of just as a way to explain this, because it's simple. And there's no all these interlocking parts and all this. It's just the pain body. I have a pain body. You have a pain body. It's kind of like the shadow. I have a pain body. You have a pain body. When the pain body's active, it's taking us over. When mommy's pain body's active, it looks like this. When your pain body's active, it looks like this. And then it's like, mommy, you were in your pain body. Your pain body had you, yes, I know. And then your pain body got triggered, remember? Because you had a temper tantrum. And okay, so it's just a very simple way of explaining it. But it's also, what children don't really get the ability to really cognitively be able to see things and place things the way we can until by age 7 or 8 or something like that. And so it has to be kept simple.
Yeah. So I have a question. How, if someone wanted to work with you guys, how can they find you?
Oh, shadowtechalchemy.com.
Okay. Yeah.
And we do every 2 weeks. We do a free Zoom call, and the link is always on shadowtechalchemy.com. It's totally free.
Oh, that reminds me. I think I put up the next one? I think I did.
Yeah, I think you did. But so the first part, we pick a subject and we do a little like half-hour, 45-minute lecture, and then it's all private, or we're starting to do it private now, the Zoom call part. Anyone can come on anonymously. You don't have to talk, you don't have to share, but it's a place for people just to ask questions and tell their experiences about doing shadow work, or any questions they have about inner work, shadow work. It's totally free. We're not charging. We're not saying you have to buy anything.
Nobody has to get coaching through us or anything like that. It's just, so every other week it's 2 p.m. Central.
On Saturday.
Central Time, Texas time. And we feel that coming on to the Zoom call, even if you're, just using an anonymous name, as long as we can hear your voice, then that is, you can actually have a real human relationship with somebody who you can talk in real time with their voice. And if they want to show themselves, and a lot of people do just come on there normally like us and share, and that is miles away from Facebook or whatever online group, and that people are really still in an anonymous kind of, to do it online where it's just typing. Yeah, you can really be transparent and typing and all of that, and it's a good way to meet people and to find out if people have shared interests and stuff. But if you really want to start working with people, or people want to work with each other, then I really think that they need to either do conference calls with voice or Zoom calls with voice and video. And so we can have a human interaction.
Yeah, because it allows you guys to heal. Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt. It allows you guys to heal through connection. Because typically our shadow and pain causes us to disconnect. Right. So I always tell people the power of healing in front of people or with people is that you're getting to maintain the connection, which is already transmuting and shifting the fact that you get to have connection while you're in this wound. Whereas normally when we're in the wound, we're somehow isolated somewhere.
Yeah,
and
it's
out the unconscious part that you're not seeing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, I was just saying, we need more community of people doing this together and supporting each other. So we've had, as in our civilization in the West, we've had the church setting, right? We had that setting, and then we have had the extended family setting, right? And so people are supporting each other through church and through extended family relationships. And now that's being shattered, right? So we don't have that kind of interpersonal depth that we had up till recently. And then that started to become shattered, however, 50 years ago or whatever. And then now a lot of our interactions are online. And so, and then on top of that, this kind of work is not really in this is not really in our civilization very deeply. And so you would have to, like, let's say, you could always go to your pastor. You could go to the preacher in a Catholic church. You have confession,
and there was some kind of there was usually some kind of intimate support, but nothing like, not really psychotherapy per se. And so now and then even psychotherapy as a whole doesn't really even adequately address what we're talking about here. So now we have a situation where we're dealing with aspects of ourselves that are deeper than what we've dealt with in our history. And we're at a place where we're more disconnected from those support structures that we had. And so if we're going to really be able to do this work and share it with each other, we have to do it in the most intimate way that we have. And so the Zoom thing here, or whatever version of it, or even just calls, even just phone calls. I think it's better to have video and get to see people's faces, but even just calls or just voice is enough. So and we invite people onto we don't get so far a lot of people. People are afraid. They're scared. They're scared to go face to face with other people who can see this stuff and who are doing this because they recognize the kind of responsibility that goes on your shoulders when you start to get serious about this.
100%. Now, I've noticed that sometimes people have talked about feeling intimidated, and when I dig into what feels intimidated, some things that said is I feel like you're going to see through me in a way that I haven't seen myself yet. Mm-hmm. And there's a fear there. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I've been looking at how can I facilitate in a way where I'm not overly cushioning them, because that's not helpful either, but I am doing it in a way where they can feel more comfortable to start trying to take these steps. But I do want to say, you guys have a website, and I want to encourage everyone to come to the website. You can sign up with your email to get y'all's download of your book, Cracking the Codes of Personal Collective Darkness. Because so far what I've read has been phenomenal, and I felt like it was so aligned with a lot of the conclusions that I'm making, and it even took it farther for me, and I was like, oh, this is gold. This is gold for me. So I want to. We're
on the same path, so we're kind of just
totally.
Everybody that's on this path. I would also recommend Robert Johnson's book, Owning Your Own Shadow, which is how I got into all this stuff. And people who are feeling intimidated by this level of work can get that it's a little 100-page book by Robert A. Johnson, Owning Your Own Shadow, and they can start doing this work, and then they can start to maybe be more comfortable getting in a group like this.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much for coming on here. I feel blessed. Thank you.
Nice meeting both of you. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah.
I will be. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was just.
I'll be publishing this. Oh.
No, you go ahead, Leslie.
I'll be publishing this and putting links so that that way it's easy for them to click on the link to your website.
Fantastic. Great. Well, you're stay in touch with us.
Yes,
if you want to
definitely.
do it again, we'll do it again. Just send us messages or whatever. And
yeah, bless you so much for doing this work and sharing it with others. It's such an important role.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Just keep going, going deeper. And
we encourage you to keep the interview thing going on too, and finding other people who are doing this work and bringing them into your circle too, and just building the community.
You always learn something every day.
Oh,
just looking, I've taken a couple of notes. By the way, the biggest takeaway was like the feeling, sitting in the feeling. I was unlocking some stuff. I was already like,
yeah, I could feel his energy shifting. He was like having little light bulb moments.
Yeah, no, so I took notes. I'm like, I'm that kind of guy.
That's in Shadow Tech, in our book. It's in the chapter that's called Emotional Processing. It's a short chapter. It's probably only 20 pages or long, and you can get the whole process in that one place. And then you can go back to John Ruskin's Emotional Clearing, which is a big old book, and you can get more on that. But that one thing, everybody should just get our book, read that one chapter, and start doing that. Very
you so
important.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
I'll
Talk to
send
you
you
soon.
this
Great
recording.
Saturday.
Okay, great. Well, and then we'll share it.
All right. Good
Okay.
work.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.